تست. Oh. Test.
volunteer role that requires countless hours of reading reports, attending meetings, making difficult decisions, and always keeping students at the heart of every choice that you make. Our board members give their time, their energy, and their expertise to ensure that our schools provide the very best education for every child every day. You help to set the vision and the direction for our district. You advocate for strong schools, support our teachers and staff, and we work to create a safe, engaging, and inclusive learning environment. You do this all not for recognition, but you do this because you care deeply about our students and our families and our community. So tonight we'd like to thank you, and throughout this week we want to say thank you for your leadership, your dedication, and your unwavering commitment to public education. Thank you for being champions for our students, partners to our staff, and advocates for our community's future. Yes. We had a little gift for you, and I see that you all saw that. So. Thank you.
Handle on this year.
We're moving up in the world. Yes, of course. In attendance this evening, we have
board members, Dr. Ruben, Dr. Seiden, Ellie Francis, and from the district administration, we have Dr. Paul Zarlis, Ian Griffith, Tim Alvarez, Lee Anderson, Dr. Marianne Alberto, Cindy Castanon, Casey Bergman, Sheldon Gordino, Dr. Kate Morris.
We have one item on the agenda this evening, and it is an information item, and it is our fiscal year 25 achievement. You will know that annually the state releases the Illinois report card, and think of the school report card. It shows how our students are learning and how our students are growing. It also includes test scores, graduation rates, and more. But I think it's really important as we talk about the report card that it's not just one test. It's a broad look at both our student success and our school success, and it's also a look at the areas that we need to improve upon. It takes a look at our district finances, our personnel, and our district priorities. The school report card offers a complete picture of both student and school performance in order to inform us, empower our families and our communities as they support our local schools. If you take a look at the slide that's up right now, you can see on the far left-hand side, and you'll have access to this after this meeting. You can click on the link on the far left-hand side down at the bottom, and that will take you directly to the Illinois report card. The thing that's interesting when we take a look at the Illinois report card is you don't just have access publicly to everything Plainfield, but you can look at any school district in the state of Illinois. You can narrow that down, and you can look at any school in the state of Illinois. You can also narrow it further and take a look at grade levels, take a look at subgroup population. The report card is 189-page reports. We don't have that long tonight, so it's our responsibility to really take that report, consolidate the report, and share with you the pieces of the Illinois report card that we deem as this part is important for us to talk about specifically in this committee, and this is the work that we're going to work towards in response to the data that we see. So when we go on to the next slide, I think it makes sense for us to start out with looking at our district environment. We've had some pretty detailed conversations as of late around school finance and school funding. When we look at last year, District 202 was funded at 73% adequacy. And what that means is in District 202, the formula shows that it takes $371 million to run this district for 1 year. And our funding was 73% of that. We came in about $100 million less than what the adequacy target is. I believe in the state of Illinois, that adequacy target, the goal when it was originally established was for it to be met by 2028. Okay, so a combination of your local revenue, your state revenue that has that adequacy target. I think you also may be aware that the adequacy target is also tied into whether you're a tier 1 or a tier 2 district. Now, I certainly don't claim to be an expert in this area. We leave that to Mr. Engstrom's committee. But I think it is important that we start with this slide because when we talk about adequacy and how our schools are funded, there are some local districts because academically and with achievement, we're compared to our local peers, we're compared to the districts that touch our boundaries. So we also look at those, what do their adequacy targets look like. We have districts And we have Luda districts that significantly are higher funded than us. And in my looking at the Luda districts that look like us in terms of the size of the districts, I only saw one district that was funded in terms of that target less than us last year, and that was 93% less than we were. So our district target, we came in at 73% last year. Any questions about that?
No, other than just the comment that, consider our advocacy based on our own dollar values and,
It's concession, sure, but it's trade.
that basically there's a struggling amongst most of us in this room that less. Clearly, we should be lower percentage of that.
And you know, I mean, I think what you're alluding to is that that impacts last year's fund. From being a tier one last year to a tier two district, which doesn't.
You say this will be available.
Yeah.
Okay. It wasn't available in our facility.
It was available as a video, which was a preview video.
Was it?
In the weekly update, as a preview,
The reason I'm asking is drop down bonds.
Yes.
Arrow. But we will have access.
Yes, absolutely. And I apologize for that. Dr. Ruin actually just pointed that out to me right before we started, that he wasn't able to access it either. So, you know, thanks for being patient with us on that one. I'll make sure you've got that message for now. I thought it was strange. Do you have any questions? All right, so when we take a look at the you guys are fine. So when you take a look at this state, you know, we've talked about what our annual summative designations mean. The summative designations at the state level are a combination of different areas that contribute to whether the state, what kind of designation the state report card gives you. This year, based on last year's data, the state has recalibrated those proficiency benchmarks. So the data that you're going to see moving forward is based on the new cut scores. I'm going to give you an example. Last year, when we take a look at the annual summative designations, last year Walker's Grove was considered an exemplary school. This year, it is receiving a commendable designation. Last year, Westmere was given a targeted school designation. And we're proud of the work that's happened over the last year. We've now moved up to a commendable designation. What happens with these designations is that the state will say, okay, Westmere is a targeted school, but we will give you support for 3 years, and that is financial support and consultant support as we work through the plan of what that looks like for improvement in that specific school. So some of our schools that are very, very close to that exemplary designation up by a very small amount to move them up to the exemplary designation. The caveat to that is the Illinois State Board of Education continues to keep us on our toes. They are changing these designations next year because what these designations do is exemplary schools are basically your top 10% performing schools that don't have any of their subgroup populations. In a zone in the performance level that's in the bottom 5% in the state. So with these designations, you've got your top 10% in the exemplary category, and you have a massive percent in the commendable category. So what the state is saying is we're going to take that commendable category and we're going to divide it up into 4 new categories. So now you're seeing 5 categories. Next year you're going to see double that. So it will be really interesting. I feel like this year is very much a benchmark for us moving forward, and we just really kind of need to keep that on the back burner as we have the conversations about how our schools are growing and what are our areas for improvement. Because this is one example of this is what we have today in November of 2025. But when we have this conversation same time next year, this conversation tones look very different. So just to share that with you. So those summative designations, how a school is meeting the needs of all of its students, the overall performance across a range of academic and student success indicators. The schools with the greatest need receive the most support. So if we go to the next slide, what we'll see is at the elementary and the middle school level, that's the breakdown of how the summative designation is determined by the state. And you'll see the top two indicators are growth indicators. Growth on ELA and growth on math. So 50% of your earned designation is, are your students growing, and how much are they growing compared to their peers? So that outcome is a percentile-based outcome, and it's comparing peers against peers that were at the same starting point and how much did they grow. That third indicator for the elementary and middle schools is proficiency. So that is your achievement. So between English and math, you're looking at 15% of that summative designation is based on student achievement, 15% out of 100%. And then the science proficiency is 5%. So now you're looking at achievement at 20%. And then the English learner progress to proficiency, and those are our students who receive ELL services when they exit out of those services. That is that indicator. And then the 25% is school quality and student success indicators, which is your absentee rate and your school climate survey, which are the 5 essentials. So that's elementary. High school is very similar. It differs slightly in that they have a graduation indicator, 4, 5, and 6 year graduation rates, and they have an English learner progress proficiency also. And then within the high school, what's different is that they also include 9th graders on track to graduate. The value in that is that the research and the data says if you've got kiddos in 9th grade that are on track to graduate, that is a higher opportunity that they will graduate high school. So, you know, that conversation is, we can't wait till senior year to say, are our kids ready to graduate? We're starting that conversation in middle school, and we're measuring that as freshmen, if not sooner. So that's how those summative designations are determined. The climate survey piece, I can say at the building level, our principals, it does present some frustration at times from our principals because that is based on, the climate survey is taken by parents, it's taken by students, and it's taken by teachers. The climate survey responses, it's difficult to influence or impact, but through your everyday actions. So the building administrators at times, you know, do cite that as a frustration, but it does carry some pretty significant weight in terms of conversations around school improvement. And I think our directors have done a really nice job of coaching our buildings to, we have to have conversations around these climate surveys because the reality is there are pieces within that 5 essentials that really speaks to how the students are feeling about school, right? So if I'm indicating as a student that I don't really feel like math is a challenging class, or I'm being academically challenged in my English classes, and we see that as a pattern across high school, then we respond to that. If our kiddos are telling us it's an easy class and I'm not finding it difficult and I don't feel challenged, we have to respond to that. So there is some good conversation in the climate survey, but it does at times present frustration on the part of our building admins, for sure. Yeah, please do.
So the academic indicators for elementary and middle.
Yeah.
Is elementary, is it start at 3rd grade and they start collecting weeks till 1 point kindergarten versus?
It does, correct. Now we do have data on the report card around kindergarten readiness. We'll get onto that. But in terms of that, yes, it starts at 3rd grade because it's based on the IAR assessment and the science assessment.
Can you clarify something?
Yeah.
Last slide.
Sure.
Sorry. You went into this, it's gonna be really fast. When you said the cut scores changed,
Yes,
okay, you gave an example.
yes,
Here's what I'm interested in.
Yeah.
You said that Western University
Westermere last year was a targeted school.
targeted and exemplary is
Walker's Road,
Walker's Road. Okay.
yes.
So did the cut scores affect, obviously the cut scores probably affect that as well.
The cut scores potentially can, but as you saw in the next slide, the achievement, which would be your cut score,
ranking versus other schools.
Yeah, so I
For,
think,
for this particular.
But is it, you mentioned the top 10% that's not how they, that's how you determine these schools. Right? It just happens to be the top 10% example. Is that correct?
well, if you take a look, if you go up to our gender there, it'll show it. I might be a school that is in the top 10% of all schools, but if I have an underperforming group, I am not an exemplary school. Does that make sense? And at the high school level, your graduation rate, which, you know, for your exemplary school, you're not at 67%.
So that's not how I understood this. I appreciate the clarification. Also, that was the frustration on ours.
Yeah.
The top 10% somehow the same as the top 90%. That's how that's determined. There will ever be a certain number of students, a certain number of schools, a certain number, and that will never increase.
And one of the frustrations that across the state we've heard, and we concur, that's why I just made eye contact with Casey because we had this exact conversation, is the goalposts are being moved because it really isn't definitive of that. This is what we have to meet to be exemplary. It's all based on what others did versus a set of outcomes. Yeah, so that's how we change it next year. That's going to be part of how we change it next year. It's going to be different. Well, right, we're open to the challenge, but it's definitely.
But the goal to get all schools to be exemplary as possible.
If they keep the 10%. If they keep the 10%, right. Then we better let the next meeting tell.
I would just say, I'd like to pass this poll, just to put it on record, maybe again, I think the governor Pritzker should maybe change the way, members see school board, and members get on the board. I had to run, you had to run, yeah, we all had to run and get elected, they don't get elected, they don't run, they get appointed by the governor. So I feel like a lot of times, when we see this stuff, especially on the next slide, some things don't make sense to me. This is what happens when you get appointed by one person. Just put that. That's what I'm saying. Very fresh.
So, just to kind of give you a visual of when we talked about the cut scores changing, the benchmarks for proficiency, if you take a look, this is an example of the IAR test. I'm going to go to grade 3. Last year, the benchmark for proficiency to demonstrate that you've met standards was a 750. This year it's a 735. So those cut scores have decreased 15 points. What I think it's important that you notice here is as the students matriculate to the next grade level, you will see that that number decreases. So the change in what it takes to have met proficiency is most significant in those lower grades. At the 8th grade level, 7th grade level, it's a matter of 5 points, 7 points, 9 points. You'll just see as they go to the next grade level, that number decreases. That's for ELA and math. When you take a look at science, they flipped it the other way around. You used to be able to be demonstrated that you've met standards and it's a proficiency benchmark in grade 5 with a score of 799. And now it's a score of 812. So they increased it by 13 points. And the norming, the renorming of this, or the change in the benchmarks for proficiency on this are specifically tied to national level research. We don't have to get into the weeds of whether we agree with it or don't agree with it. This is the reality of what we have had to address this year with our students. I think it's also important to note that the spring 2025, the Illinois High School Assessment was the ACT. We changed from the SAT. So that is also a new benchmark. So what our teams here and our buildings and our building administrators and our teachers and our division chairs, what they are dealing with this is simply, we're back at 0 again. This is our starting point again, which is exciting. It is exciting, the work is exciting, but at the same time, when we're having conversations around historical data and historical measures, it does make it challenging. It does make it challenging. You'll also see the last point on that slide is that in ELA and math, the highest score that you can get is an 850, and on science, it's a 900. So that's how it has changed, which is right around about an 83%.
The 900 changed, or it was always up to 900?
It was always up to 900. Correct.
So for layman's terms, for people watching at home, ELA and English and math.
Yep.
Would you say
You can score lower
yes,
on
it's
English
easier.
and math
So once again, we're lowering. It's easier to be proficient.
to earn proficiency. Okay, so our next slide is really then taking a look at who are our students. Our demographic data that we report to the state of Illinois are, this is the makeup of our students. This is who our students are. We're just over 24,000 students in our district, and we have students from every group in our district. In terms of our low-income students, I think it's an interesting overlay between the district and the state. 33.4% of our students last year qualified as low-income students. At the state level, that average is 49.7. So almost half of the students across the state of Illinois qualify low-income. In our district, 33.4. And then the English learners in our district are at 14.2%. Thank you. And that's very close to the state average of 17.5%. So when we start to look at this data, those are our kids who are in front of us. And I think if we take a look and we move on to the next slide, when we're taking a look at who our students are, we also need to take a look at who are our students and what seats are they sitting in. And one of the pieces that is reported on the report card is the advanced academic programs. We pulled some of this data when we had our high school presentation around who are our kids at the high school level, what are they taking and what are they sitting in. This is data we're very proud of. Our AP classes, students taking one or more, our dual credit students, our students in enrichment or in honors, and we do not run an IB program here, so that one is not relevant. I think what is interesting to say here is that over 50% of our students at the freshman level took an upper level course. This was something when Dr. Wood was the director of high school. We have an open enrollment. This is something that we've had in place for years and years, that if students want to come into our high schools and take a higher level course, we do not restrict them, we allow them to do that. And I think enriching and providing those enrichment opportunities for students who may never have had them in elementary or in middle school, there's a lot of value to that because you're allowing students as they enter high school to take risks. To try things that are not familiar to them. We've had an initiative over the last couple of years. It was in part driven by the Acceleration Act, but in part driven by the initiative at the schools to also have individual conversations with students who are not in an upper level class to see where their interests and their strengths are so that they can be successful in those classes. And our data showed us last year, we pushed many students into upper level classes who had not taken them before, and their AP scores came back, and we had, remind me again, do you remember that number? Was it over 650 students in AP language?
Yeah, we had like 90%.
And that was just the initiative of saying to students, give it a shot, take a risk.
Is there any plans of rolling that down into middle school?
In terms of opening it up.
Yeah, because in my mind, in middle school, it's a little less risky.
Yeah.
So if they attempt and it's not the right, it doesn't necessarily harm them. Where in high school, there's other factors.
Yeah.
So
To clarify, you're asking just rolling the opportunity
advanced courses.
as opposed to.
Oh yeah.
Just want to make sure I understood you correctly.
No,
So
just,
everybody else.
yeah, just
Yeah.
opening it up if students feel like they can attempt like the advanced math classes or honors TLA, whatever that might be.
Yeah.
At the middle school level, because I
Yeah.
know right now, elementary is kind of pretty tight.
It's tight.
And then middle school still leans more towards that model than the high school model. So I don't know, has that ever been, is that something that's considered?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it is strategically and delicately being addressed at the middle school level, and I'll give an example. 5 years ago, we opened up a program for the students that were going into 6th grade to go into honors math. Now, that was very much let's take a look at those students that didn't qualify as elementary, but they're high achieving in their regular 5th grade math, and can we accelerate those students over the summer? We've had really strong data with those students as they go into 6 honors, preparing them over the summer. There's some challenges with that, but for the overall, it's been successful. There are conversations of what would that look like if we were to pull down English 1, or what would that look like if we were to pull down a high school history course. The conversation hasn't stopped with math. It's just going much slower with the other subject areas. It's very much tied to certifications at the middle school level.
So I guess my question is less about whether they're bringing the high school credit, which requires certification.
Yep.
More to the opportunities for the, like, for example, 7th grade. Options.
Yep.
High school credit or not.
Yep.
But is there a open enrollment? Like there would be in high school, honors, have the option to go up against that middle school. Tourism works pretty well out there. You've got 7th graders who get the choice to go continue on the whole pathway with ELA, or if they're very strong in that, have the option to opt in, where they might not have been recommended.
That's a suggestion we can certainly bring back, and I don't know, Michelle, if you want to speak to that, if that conversation has already started. I'm going to assume it hasn't, but.
Yeah, so I think that the tricky thing for us is our model, because we use a grade level acceleration. You have to deal very carefully with that, because you're seeing the whole grade levels going to that honors level coursework. That's tricky in some way, because there's some foundational skills that you need to have in order for the next level of coursework. One of the things that we were looking at is expanding some of our other content areas. Some feedback that we've gotten from parents is, I may have a student that's in honors, and they are taking 2 honors courses in middle school, and now all of a sudden I'm full class load of honors in high school. It's a lot to manage. So we're looking at some of the other content areas, and we're looking at not necessarily doing a grade level acceleration, taking, let's say, 8th grade social studies and making it a more rigorous course, so that I don't have deficits that I'm missing because I didn't get that content, or maybe I'm incorporating more writing because that can be preparing for some of those AP courses. I think those opportunities will help some of our kids. It's just really tricky when you make such a jump. If we have been fortunate to have the summer programs, but I don't know what that would look like if we're able to expand that, or we're having more challenges with some of our families of being able to get to those summer programs, or I'm to take summer off and not have to go to a summer program, or I'm traveling, or I'm in sports, so I can't come to those things. So it's certainly something we can look into. I just am really hopeful with some of looking at some of those other content, other opportunities for our students. And it would also open up for the students that maybe math is not their thing, but they are very passionate about a content area like social studies or science. And maybe they haven't been something that was considered for an honors language arts in the past, but because I'm so passionate about that content, I could be doing very well in that class. So those are some other things we're looking at. My daughter but I wonder if these are some of that great, that this summer.
I know, I
was
was
gonna say that
you
nice.
must have read your notes.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, we're gonna do, over the summer, we're gonna switch our 6H math models in person for 1 week, so there's a connection to the teacher, there's direct instruction with the teacher, but then also giving them opportunity after that 1 week in person for them to then transition to online. Because the other piece that also comes out of our department is our kids are all going to take, if they go to college, they are all going to take online classes. So part of our model is if there's an opportunity to have students in an environment where they're learning online, because there's a need, because there's a district need, then we would be able to put that in place. So summer is a great opportunity to kind of pilot what that model would look like.
Awesome, so I'm glad I could serve up your.
That was fabulous. Well done. I know.
It was.
I know. So then our next slide, I'm starting with this one that is the kindergarten readiness, because really when we take a look at our student achievement and we take a look at our student growth, I think the reality is it's important to know that our students come to us and we meet them where they are. We have no influence on our kindergarten readiness unless our students have come through our preschool. So this slide specifically, this measure is to determine during the first 9 weeks of school, are our incoming kindergarten students ready in 3 developmental areas. So those developmental areas that are assessed are the social emotional area, language and literacy, and math. 83% of our incoming kindergarten students took this assessment last year, and you can see on the right side of the first bar graph that 37.7% of our students were prepared through this measure for kindergarten in the 3 developmental domains. Now, the value of starting with this is these are our kids that are coming to us. And this is where we start. And our responsibility is to meet our students where they are. We cannot impact or influence prior to kindergarten unless they're in our preschool. But we start with 37.7% of our incoming kindergartners demonstrate that they have proficiency in those 3 areas. You can see from this that the students in District 202 are slightly above the state average in readiness, and we have deliberate efforts in place through our kindergarten staff. So if we go to the next slide, we'll see how do we respond to this data. So this is part of achievement, but it's really also part of program of work. When you look at kindergarten and you look at that data that was on the previous slide, here's one of the first things that we did. We shifted the design and the delivery of the kindergarten experience this year. This came out of the data, this came out of historical data, and this came out of listening to our teachers when our teachers shared what was happening in the kindergarten classrooms and how we needed to improve. So the first thing we did was update the kindergarten supply list. Sounds pretty simple. But we included things such as Play-Doh on the supply list. If you have an opportunity to be in a kindergarten classroom and you see how Play-Doh is used in a kindergarten classroom, you will understand why it's on the supply list. We alternated our first week schedule where the kids came every other day by alphabetical order, first half of the alphabet, second half of the alphabet every other day. As an opportunity for the teachers to have small groups to teach the students routines, expectations, classroom procedures, to get to know the students, for the students to get to know each other, for them also to have observational opportunities of the initial student behaviors as they're coming into the building. We have a dedicated paraprofessional in the kindergartens at all school that has been a game changer in our buildings. That's what we're hearing from our elementary staff. Having that kindergarten paraprofessional, we started it in Title I the year before. And it found its way into practice across all of our 18 elementary schools. We have dedicated minutes that are dedicated to exploration, to student exploration time. We have not changed our curriculum standards. We have not changed the resources that we use. We've just made some changes to those other pieces. And then the final piece is guided recess. Not recess in the traditional thought where the kids run out and there's minimal structure, there's simple supervision. It's guided in that there's structure to it, and the structure to it, it's overseen by the teachers. It includes SEL skills, safety behaviors, and cooperative learning. So when we talk about the data that we see on the report card, we talk about the achievement that we see on the report card, and we talk about are our kids ready to come to school, this is a starting point of the students that are in our district. it's almost like a pretest.
Yeah.
You know, it's the beginning of the year, and those end of the year outcomes are really going to help us. And you know, credit to all of our elementary directors, led by Mr. Hartman, Julie Anderson, Scott Fink, just having really professional conversations with our buildings in terms of what are the needs, how do we support, how can we change, and what do you need from us for this to be successful. You guys remember the discipline conversations we've had over the last couple of years around student discipline. This is an intervention. This is a response to what we're seeing to see how we can make those changes.
Has there been any discussion on the potential value of reaching out to other community resources who are more likely to interact with children prior to kindergarten, either the other professional, preschool, libraries, churches, daycares, of the park district, saying, hey, here's the things that our kindergartners are expected to know, to any extent that you guys, and maybe even to a recognition, preschool or some of the programs that they are.
I mean, you know that community, the communication is on our program of work and is part of our strategic plan, but I know Casey can speak to this a little bit, but even internally, I think about the visits that we did with our elementary principals to Bonnie, to observe Bonnie, but beyond our organization, we haven't yet, but it doesn't mean it's off the table.
Not necessarily partnering with organizations, but we have, like, one of the conversations we had a lot around some of these initiatives was our own screening and our own readiness measures, which would, like, the idea is that it would lead to supporting parents with onboarding skills, prerequisite skills, supporting just kind of the community at large. So we've talked about opening up with that screening process and our own screening process further in the year. And we also, like, literally this week, we were talking about revamping the kindergarten readiness presentations that come with registration, that come with moving students from preschool to elementary. So, not directly what you're suggesting, but adjacent to, for sure.
I didn't realize we did that kindergarten readiness stuff with the registration thing, so I'm glad I'm doing that.
We do.
It's amazing.
We do. It's time for a refresh.
Yeah.
That was our conversation.
Yep.
So.
And also using the parent university to provide information for our parents from kindergarten readiness. That's been a conversation that is something that we plan to put in there this year. So not exactly what you're asking, but certainly aligned to what you're asking.
Sure.
And I also love the idea too. So no ask, graduates this comes from meeting and no words.
Before we move on, to look at, because first thing I thought when you said that was, you know, it's, if children were 3 and 4 years old, maybe live in the town. I mean, most parents, I'm assuming, would be on it. So, okay. Thank you.
Yep, no, please don't apologize. It's a good conversation. So our next slide is around our student growth. So in ELA this year, our student growth fell right in the middle. And when you look at the growth by grade on this slide, our team will continue to evaluate the growth from 3rd grade to 4th grade, that transition to ensure both its standards alignment in the instructional practices and examine the growth of this grade level. In turn, we will study this cohort of kids because when we take a look at that grade 4 growth from 3rd grade to 4th grade, we really need to take a look at what does the cohort look like, and also take a look at that alignment of our curriculum, both our scope and our sequence of our ELA curriculum, because as you can see, 3rd grade, 4th grade there
So just to clarify, that top number, they're currently in fifth grade right now.
Those kiddos are currently in fifth grade.
Just one time, just remember they started there.
They're
On
on
that.
We're not allowed to say that word. They
Their
are.
government's response.
So we'll be keeping an eye on this cohort and their current fifth grade students. So again, back to that slide that we were just on, our growth fell right in the middle, and at 50th percentile, obviously, yeah, we're right in the average of our growth. District 49.5. For our English language arts proficiency, FY24 previous year was 47.8%. But again, we can't measure those percentages against each other because the benchmarks, the proficiency benchmarks have changed. So overall, our proficiency this past year of English language arts was 61.5%. State level 52.4%. Our goal is always to be higher than the state. Our goal is to grow that spread in terms of our achievement above the state. That's where we are on our English language proficiency. IAR is third grade through eighth grade, and the ACT suite are and then the DLM is the dynamic learning maps. That's the alternative assessment that is taken by our students who it is not appropriate for them to take the IAR.
Just to add to the IAR, that is actually a significant growth over the prior year. It was a growth of about 6% from the year prior, and it was a growth of almost 9% from the year prior to that. It is a very small group of students, though, so I do need to put that out there. We're not talking about thousands as we are when we're looking at other assessments, but we have seen growth over the significant growth over the past 10 years.
For DLM, correct. And then this slide really takes a look by grade level so that we can, this is across district, but it is by grade level. It's got our high school there, it's got the district summary at the top, and then our high school grades 3 through 8, and then individual grade levels below that. You'll see that 61.5% of our students in 3 through 11 demonstrate proficiency in ELA compared to the state percentage of 52.4. As I said, the goal is always to maintain above the state average and increase that spread between the two. We, as a district, our students average higher than the state average on every single data point, with the closest grades being 9 and 10. In FY24, we were 8.4% higher than the state average. FY25, which is the data that you see in front of you there, we were 9.1% higher than the state average. So even though those proficiency benchmarks changed, we still look at were we higher than the state, and we did increase, even though it was a small increase, we did increase from 8.4 above the state to 9.4. So when we take a look at our ELA data, one of the things we also take a look at is how are we responding, what are we doing, what does the work of the team look like, what does the work of the buildings look like, developing our own literacy plan, having a focus on the science of reading and the professional development that's aligned to that, having a deliberate focus around oracy, both in the classrooms and what does it look like in instruction, research-aligned instruction, standard-aligned instruction and curriculum, parent literacy nights across our buildings. We have a proposal for our parent literacy night in the spring, a series of parent literacy nights at the elementary level. I think we've got 3 or 4 dates on that one. And the purpose for that ties to what you were talking about, Barb, is connecting with the families on some of these. Our grant funding, how we're using our grant funding to support literacy across the district and what that looks like. Partnering with the Regional Office of Education for professional development, and then also professional development for our building administrators and also for our teachers around the WIDA framework, which is the framework for English language acquisition. So that's all of the work that responds to Okay, so now we're moving on to math. The math IAR student growth falls right in the middle of the average growth in the 50th percentile compared to the students across the state, similar to ELA growth. And you can see by grade level, the highest growth percentile are the students in 8th grade. This specifically is for IAR, but all right around between 50 and 53%. You can see that growth. So that overlay on the district, on the state is 50th percentile being the average. If you go to the next slide, our math proficiency this past year was 43.6%. And you will see there the IAR is 43.3, the TLM, which is that alternative assessment, 17.3, and ACT 47.2. And you'll see with all of those we are above the state average. You know that this has been a focus for us in terms of program of work, both at the district level and at the building and classroom level. It continues to be a focus. The challenge with math proficiency is not unique to Plainfield, but we are only focused on what's happening here in Plainfield. We use the state data, we use the national norms, or the national data to have conversations, but our focus is on the work that's happening here and responding to what's happening in our classrooms. So this will continue to be a priority out of curriculum instruction and at building levels until we start to see a shift. I think, credit to the work that's happening over here and over here with the directors and leading math conversations and the conversations around what is instructional best practice in math and what does it look like and are we observing it and are we seeing it. I had a conversation with the director today who said I'll be at this building tomorrow all day. I'm going to be in math classrooms all day. That's what it's involved in. So the action with we recognize that we need to support our students to improve this. And it's very deliberate and very deliberate conversation and action. So, talking we had school improvement meetings today. Casey, would you share what you did with your building leaders today?
Sure. We used Nerds Candy as representatives of digits in base 5. So one piece of candy was worth a single unit, a second piece of candy was worth the 5's place, and the third piece of candy was worth the 25's place in base 5. And we just went through the simple process of adding and subtracting in base 5, but since we didn't use numerical representations, we really kind of had to physically manipulate the pieces to regroup. And it just forced us into articulating really, really precisely why we regroup and what that means to regroup at a conceptual level, as opposed to what we do so automatic, which is cross out the 2, make it a 1, bring it over, drop it down. Like you do that so rudely that you probably don't spend a lot of time thinking about it, and you probably don't need to. But our 6-year-olds need to, and our 7-year-olds need to. So we forced ourselves into that process and had fun using how we can. So that's what it was.
So, and I asked that he share that with you because that's the work that we administrative level, with the goal of when our administrators are in classrooms that they recognize best practice in instruction. They can recognize student engagement in math and what that looks like. With the goal of when you see best practice, it impacts student learning, student understanding, student knowledge, student achievement. So it's an ongoing process. We have some very good conversations around that. If we move to our next slide, this provides us with the data on our students by grade level in math this past year. You'll see that it demonstrates we continue to work towards improvement across all of our grade levels. And while the challenge isn't unique to Plainfield, we're seeing an average of 5% above the state averages across the grade levels. Our students outperformed the state averages on math, in ELA and in math. In fiscal year 24, we were 3.6% above the state average. This past year, we were 5.2% above the state average. Small but incremental improvement, reflective of this continued focus on this. You can see the grades at the top. You can see the grades where again, that's a piece that's out of our control, but that is reality.
Just looking at historical data, which we're talking.
Yeah, absolutely is.
That's the hardest part.
Yeah. Yes.
Very curious.
Yeah, high school to find the cohort data,
Yep.
which is our favorite kind of data, right? But we'll get there, hopefully.
They don't change in the next.
Yeah. No, but those pieces, and those are the pieces that we can't control, but what we can control is what we measure internally. We can't control what our formative assessment looks like, we can't control what our summative assessment looks like, we can't control what our instructional best practices look like. So those are the areas that we focus on. So while we report this, because we're required to report our, to talk about our data on our report card, and there's pieces of it that we're very proud of, there are pieces that we have no control over. So to be honest, we just try not to give our energy to the pieces that we can't control. We focus on what we can. Yeah. So how we respond to this data is specifically our building thinking classrooms in math, which is a model that we have really embraced K-12 around what effective learning teaching and learning looks like in a math classroom. You heard the elementary principals talk about that at our last meeting. I'm sure you heard our high school principals talk about it. I'm sure our middle school folks will mention it when they come in December. So we have our building thinking classrooms, our professional development, our math discourse, and talking about math, as opposed to the sage on the stage, the teacher that is full direct instruction the whole time. What does that classroom look like? Our students talking about problem solving, our students explaining how they solve the problem, how they solve their math problems, are the students talking to each other, student agency, expecting students to have a voice in the math classroom. At the high school level, pragmatically, we added the algebra skills and the geometry skills at the high school level. So we're working in that data currently based on the first quarter, the D's and the F's, and comparing them year over year. In our math classes, we have math study halls at the high school. We've increased math instructional minutes at the kindergarten level, K-5 level, and deliberate math interventions. So that's the work that's happening in response to this. In science, as I shared with you, those cut scores in science increased. They did not decrease. And again, we focus on what that looks like in terms of our district versus the state. Is we increase the cut scores for students to demonstrate proficiency on the SNR science assessment compared to last year's cut scores, or the year before, I should say. Therefore, the percentage of students demonstrating proficiency is at 52.5% this year. The district's 5th and 8th grade students are the ones who take this. Those are the only 2 grade levels that take the Illinois Science Assessment now, and they were 9.5% higher than the state average. So while the percentage of students who demonstrated proficiency is less than last year because of the change in the cut scores, we're still almost 10% higher than the state average. And again, with the goal of continuing to increase that spread. So there's a lot more to the report card. There is data around our teachers, around our finances, around our community, around our environments and our buildings, but this is an achievement presentation. So I'm not going to focus on our teachers and the data that ties to that, or our finances that ties to that. But I do think it's important that when we share this with you, there's a couple of slides in here that we titled Beyond the Report Card, which ties into achievement, but it's not out there publicly. But we wanted, as board members, for you to have an opportunity to take a look at the work that's happening beyond the report card around student achievement. So, for example, I linked the high school achievement presentation in there that they presented to you in September, just for you to refer back to, because it has a lot of the high school achievement data tied in that's not in the report card. We're also proud of our access data this year. Our exit percentage, Cindy Castanon has done a wonderful job over the past couple of years of leading in our multilingual education area to ensure that A, we have appropriate programming for our students, and B, we have highly qualified, competent educators in front of our kids. Our goal of students that are learning English is for them to exit out of that they have demonstrated proficiency in the English language. From the research that we provide to them, to the professional development, to the programming, to the staffing, to the hiring. Cindy's just done a marvelous job over the last few years of really leading that. So I wanted to ensure that you had access to take a look at our exit percentages, to take a look at our professional development that's happening in our buildings around the multilingual learner experience, and also to take a look at the new WIDA framework, specifically around language acquisition and professional development that will also be offered to our principals. What I also wanted you to have access to was our new courses as a result of the 8-period day. Student enrollment by building, the different courses that are offered, what students have taken advantage of what classes, so that we can see that data. If we move to the next slide. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah. Click on the link. Yeah. Just in the interest of time, but I'm not gonna open it, but I want you to know it's there.
Real quick,
Yeah.
so the high school courses.
Yes.
The last one was really nice
Yeah.
last year, and he was going through all that stuff, and he said, "Oh, really cool. Let's sponsor."
I love that.
That's what he's doing. So great.
And I just happened to observe in my classroom on Monday. At Plainfield Central. It was fabulous. Yeah, it was fabulous. I think it's I'm just so excited. We just had a really good conversation today about the plumbing class and the electrics class that were approved this year for next year. So it was a full classroom. Yeah.
I just say really quick,
Yeah, please do.
it was a proud mom moment for me when I was in there at Springfield Central and there were students doing math about the engines and reading out loud and having conversations around like a pamphlet about auto, and I was just like, they're reading and comprehension and doing math and they don't even realize they're reading. Yeah. But that's the goal, right? Like, it's great.
Yeah.
Teachers doing a great job.
And I think the other pieces around the report card, beyond the report card, the IAR cohort comparison, Mr. Francis, this really speaks to the question that you just brought up. This is something that our department spends a lot of time in, and that's looking at cohorts of students, because what we want to see is grade over grade that they are improving. So we study the cohorts every year. It's ongoing, it's part of our practice, but cohort data is shared on the school report card. So we make sure that we look at it and we talk about it, we recognize it, and we look for patterns and we look for areas we need to focus on. So that's why I said this year's fifth graders, that's a group that we're going to be keeping on the front burner. And then our school level data is specifically around the IAR summary, looking at schools within the district by level and where are areas that we need to focus on. And then that final one is the regular data checks beyond the academics. So really taking a look at what electronically absentee data look like and how we use those reports and the kind of reports that we do use to keep that conversation up. And then this final one is around the talking points that we put in the weekly update last week. The reason why this one, if you would click on this one, please. The reason why we put this one in the weekly update is it really just makes the information succinct. And the question always is, well, how are we doing compared to others? Every one of these data points has a state average and a district average. So if you didn't have a chance to take a look at that through the weekly update last week, I would highly recommend you spend some time looking at that. It also helps. We shared this with the building principals. This also helps with our principals when they're having conversations about what we look like compared to the rest of the state. And just really to tie it all together, our district improvement goals for this school year on this final slide, our district improvement goals were continued emphasis on math, our emphasis on overall student achievement in reading, so our literacy goals, and our goal 3, which in no way is reflected on the report card, but it's really important for us as the classroom environment is rapidly changing and the influence of technology, the impact of technology is rapidly changing, is that we really need to ensure that we're keeping our kids close in terms of critical evaluation, in terms of the information that they receive online, and online, and the responsibility that we have as an education system to ensure that our students, when they're working in digital platforms, have a comprehensive understanding of how to do that, and how to do it safely, and how to do it so that it works for them through. So those are our 3 district improvement goals for this year. 2 of them are all over the report card. That final one is not, but I did want to bring that back also. And then really just to ask you, that's a lot of talking that I've done today. I let our teams know that I would do the talking on this just because it would end up being a 2-hour presentation, it truly would. But please know this is not work that belongs to me. This is work that belongs to our teachers, that belongs to our students, that belongs to our directors at this table. I just get to be the vessel that puts your message, right? There is some amazing work that's happening in this district around our district goals. And, I think we're all, everyone at the table say we're very excited to be part of this. So, what questions do you have for us at this time? It was very thorough.
Just a fun comment. I think this level of assessment has its place.
Sure.
Yes.
Yes.
Awards, 30,000 review, that's achieving. And I know that you all are doing what our teachers are doing is really matters in those classrooms. We get to see but I just want to recognize what you've done in the district. Teachers are doing, students in our schools. It's just, it's amazing. It doesn't, it's not always captured. So, I think that's
This is comedy is not the right word, but the irony to this is data that was from March and we're in November. The work that I talk about, they started planning this last year. This is not new work to us. There were no major surprises in this. But it does keep us A, accountable, and B, understand that this is always going to be a public conversation. So we have to be very comfortable having this public conversation. So we appreciate it, but I'm sure that after this, there may be questions that you say, oh, I wish I had asked this, or I was thinking about this, just shoot us an email and we can respond to it accordingly. That's our agenda item for this evening. That's all we have. Our look ahead, our next meeting is December 10th. Information meetings, we have quite a few. Okay, so we'll have the middle school presentation. You'll get videos up in advance for those. We have our middle school principals coming in. We have a strategic plan update on our strategic plan goals. So you'll hear specifically from the goals I oversees and student services overseas. You will have the high school summer school curriculum guide for 30-day display. We're going to give you a brief update on our recommendations that come in January specific to the high school grading system. There is the goal. Is the goal. So we're going to bring that as an information item to this committee in January with a possible recommendation to move that to go into effect in the fall of 2026. We will, and then our approval in December is specifically for 30-day display resources. We'll bring resources to you in December and in January for approval, depending on our timing and working with our vendors. But the goal is the latest resources that we'll bring to you will be in January, along 30-day display, and then approval will probably be I imagine it will be. I imagine it will be. But that's all. That's all. That's all we have for this evening.
Sorry. then in attendance are, myself, Barb Simon, Ellie Scholastic, and Greg Nichols from the school board. Charlie
Thank you.
Sadler, thank you, and Kendra Sullivan from PCRA Financial Solutions. Are there any issues?
This week we joined trees across the state celebrating School Board Members Day on November 15th. It's a special time to recognize the incredible dedication, service, and leadership of school board members. Serving on school board is a voluntary role that requires countless hours of reading reports and meetings, making difficult decisions, always keeping students part of every choice. Our board members, through their time, energy, and expertise, ensure schools provide very best education for every child every day. They help set the vision and direction for our district. They advocate for strong schools, for their teachers, staff, and work to create safe, engaging, inclusive learning environments. They do all this after our mission, but because they care deeply about our students, our families, and their future. So tonight, and throughout this week, we want to say thank you. All of you, to your leadership, your dedication, your unwavering commitment to public education. Thank you for your teaching to our students, partners, our staff, and advocates for our students. We might wait for tax So the first information item is the cash flow outlook and investment strategy update. On the fall of 2023, we decided to move forward with a long-term strategy approach for the district investments. District administration continues to meet on a quarterly basis with PTA, with institutions to maximize our portfolio to be and also meet our
This is largely Kendra's show, talking about the long-term portfolio, but as we kick it over to that first slide, I'd like to show the basis of kind of how we formulate our analysis and determine the amount of dollars that can be invested in that long-term portfolio. You'll see that this is what we call our mountain graph, and this is a very common-looking graph for most of northern Illinois, in that you more or less get paid twice a year when property taxes come in. So you'll see those spikes as they come in June and September. And for the most part, after that September, you start to spend down your fund balances until you get more or less paid again in the following June. Obviously, there are other revenue sources that come along with it. I think you guys talked about the EDF and how that affects you, and that's factored into this analysis as well. But from that, we are able to determine what the high point is in terms of fund count, what the low point is, and then you can see across as you're looking across, if you're just kind of eyeballing where that low point comes in somewhere, around that $100 million mark. So I'm just going to point out that navy blue, that dark at the bottom, that is a portion that we've carved off and say, hey, these are reserve dollars. We should put these to work and get these working out and doing a little bit better work for us along the yield curve. Let's lock in some longer durations, obtain some better yields, be able to obtain some different products. And that's that blue portion of which Kendra's going to speak about here for the rest of the presentation. The other portion would be that short-term side. So while the long-term makes up a significant portion, obviously your day-to-day operations is still a focus of the analysis as well. So we do our best to also manage that cash flow in there as well, and maximizing interest on the short-term side. So investments out from, say, 0 days out to 365 days. And we work with Rick and his team on that and being able to provide some alternatives for those funds as well. So before I kick it over to Kendra, any questions for me on the kind of the basis on why we do this or how that picture looks?
So we move forward to the next slide. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for having me here. Nice to meet you all. I'm going to start with just a little bit on the economy and what's going on, and try to tie that into the cash flow and what our investment strategy is going forward. Because it's timely given that our Federal Reserve is in a rate cutting cycle at this point.
And want to bring everything back to kind of what's going on in the broader economy. That inflation remains a little bit higher than where the Federal Reserve would like to see it, so a little bit stickier, as they'll call it, as well as a labor market that's starting to show signs of softening. And what that's doing for the Federal Reserve, putting it kind of in the middle of, do we leave rates high or do we bring them down? And that's really been the debate at every meeting that we've seen. We did just have a 25 basis point rate cut at our most recent Federal Reserve meeting. But interestingly, at that same meeting, the chairman, Chairman Powell, came out and said another cut in December is actually far from a foregone conclusion. Meaning it might pause after this one cut. Prior to that meeting, markets had anticipated 2 rate cuts. So what we actually saw on the Treasury curve here was the very front end, our money market rates start to come down, but that 6, 9, 3-year, 5-year, 10-year part of the curve actually moved up. And how that can influence your investment strategy in your long-term portfolio that we're going to talk about, that opens up opportunities as the portfolio is continuously reinvested to reinvest at these higher rates and really lock in these higher yields as the front end starts to come down. And so you'll start to see the Treasury curve continue to move in what we call a normalization. So that front end is going to come down and the back end should be higher, and you should start to see more normal yields move. Your short-term yields will look lower than your long-term yields. And having that capital in place and being able to segregate some of that portfolio allows you to really capitalize on those higher rates and create more total return or growing the whole pie in total. Moving on to the next slide, just kind of putting that into practice and looking at the holistic portfolio. So talking about that liquidity or your day-to-day operations and money that you do need, and just showing what that long-term versus short-term percentage is. And the part that we're going to be talking about is actually in the green. And then we take another snapshot of the short-term portfolio and how you have it invested. And so this is the part that's not part of the dark blue line that Charlie was speaking to.
And so really my interactions more with Rick and the team come up on that short-term side of the portfolio. So again, most analysts are talking about that long-term. On that short-term, we will look at options, including money markets and government agencies, treasury bills. I started to talk to Rick about maybe potentially some commercial paper there as well. So
what are the rules about investing?
So the 3 tenets of public funds investing are safety, liquidity, yield. So preservation of principal is that safety above all else. Then liquid, making sure it's liquid, and then having yield. So that having those 3 parameters in place restricts you significantly on what you can do. For instance, stocks are not permissible. So generally it would be government agencies, U.S. treasuries, commercial paper, all those money market instruments you might see.
XRP?
No.
None of that stuff.
None of that stuff. So plain vanilla.
If we want to move forward one more slide, we can actually speak directly to that about what is allowed and what's not. We do follow your own policy as well as Illinois statute. That's what we can invest in. And here's a breakdown of the allocation of those different so breaking down those different security types between U.S. government bonds, agency mortgage-backed securities, municipals, corporates, and some cash in there. And that's really just waiting for reinvestment. So as things mature and we get reinvested into the portfolio, overall the portfolio is very high quality, liquid, and well diversified. And one thing I do want to point out from the characteristics is we're always looking at the yield of our portfolio compared to our benchmark. Now your yield is not going to equal your total return, but it is a good indicator, and we want to be above that benchmark, meaning that we're utilizing some of the security types that is invested in your long-term portfolio that might be a little bit more esoteric for a certain portfolio, including those agency mortgage-backed securities and corporates. Being that we do have the research behind it and the teams to be able to build that out, we can invest in those products safely and really add to that current portfolio yield and the total return of the portfolio over the long term.
So I'll add real quickly. So when we talk about your individual district policy versus the state, your policy can be more conservative. It cannot be more, aggressive than the state policy. So.
And so moving into that total return picture on the next slide here, speaking about how yield can translate into total return, just a snapshot of what your returns have been in that long-term portfolio. I do see that the total return should continue to be strong going forward. As I mentioned, with those higher rates on the longer end of the curve, you're actually locking in those rates and able to translate that longer duration. The cash portfolio, you might see a little bit more return volatility on the short end, so a month-to-month, quarterly basis. But over the long term, that's where you're really going to start to see that value, and where you want to see your manager outperforming your benchmark. And so what we're showing here is both growth and net growth being returns as is, net less than management fees, and the cost to manage those funds, and having those both above your benchmark with quite strong returns over time is what we want to see in every class insurance slide.
I think that's it. I think as I've mentioned the last couple of times I've come out, let's start using the fortuitous and the timing of when we started this portfolio as interest rates have come down, the return of the portfolio has done very well. Like for instance, since inception, we've been at 6%, just above 6%. There's never been a bond that's paid 6% in this portfolio. That's strictly from capital gains, from market movements. That's partly luck, but timing of when we started the
It is an actively managed portfolio, so as we continuously reinvest in higher rates. And so when rates were at 0%, so coming into it at the high rate environment was really a strong, great move, and I think that continues being what we see in the going forward. We haven't seen the long end rate coming down, with the anticipation that inflation is going to remain a little bit longer here. So really time to be invested and remain invested. So having that long-term portfolio.
So, for a short-term strategy, absolutely, I think we can employ that as those come due, and then as a board make a decision. It's like, hey, it would be more. Do we want to help out local school districts that might need to borrow funds on a short-term basis? But I think it could be something that you would want to look at as a board. But again, those are generally very short-term investments. They would be just a couple of months. So I would do it only within the confines of you have cash position in your short-term portfolio.
And to be clear, for the 2 months versus this portfolio, it's actually like a 10-year portfolio. The duration is a little over 3.5 years usually. So just to prepare for those 2 months versus. Pardon?
Any questions? So Cook County, I don't know if you followed it all, obviously being here in Lily, you haven't, but they were extremely late in issuing their property tax bills. In fact, they are supposed to go out this Friday, the 14th, due December 15th. So it should have been due August 1st. So districts in Cook County should have, you saw how your graph bumps up in September, Cook's bumps up in August. And without that, they never got that bump, so they could continue to spend down. So we have been working with probably a couple dozen school districts that had to borrow in anticipation of those taxes that are yet to come in. So that's not normal. The amount of districts that are normally out there looking to borrow are usually few and far between. We do work with Oswego as well, and they would be one that historically has perpetually had to borrow. They've gotten better over the last several years, but for the most part, the opportunities are usually small until you get cases like this. So this was, I want to say it was a one-off, but it happened a couple years ago, and they had not. The issue that they are resolving this month has not been promised to be resolved for next year. So see you next week in Chicago for anybody that's there. Yes, come by our booth, please. I think we're 800. We always want visitors.
Nice to meet you.
Thank you. We'll see you next weekend. Thanks, nice job.
Those numbers have changed. So we want to make sure that we're capturing everything, so whenever we levy, we ask for a little bit more than what we think the extension is going to be. We think it's important to provide the extension because that's closer to what your actually tax rate's going to be. Does that make sense? And your extension is basically you're taking the prior year's extension, 215 times CPI, 2.9, 221, plus new construction, which then equates to $226.5 million. Every $25 million worth of new property is roughly $1 million. Take a look at that next slide.
Can you just repeat that last sentence?
Yep.
Just the last
Anytime you have roughly $25 million of new property, it equates to roughly $1 million or approximately $1 million of an extension or increase in extension. Makes sense?
Yeah.
So then if you take a look at, yes, which we'll get into here in a little bit. We don't like necessarily use the term balloon, but yes, we're balloons.
Yeah, I would make this whole thing really easy and just say we would like $1 billion.
You absolutely can. But that would make my life easier, and I don't show any kind of extensions or any kind of, but I think the rate's gonna be, yes. Do we have that recommendation? Can we recommend it?
All in favor, say aye.
So as soon as we get to that section.
Did you say aye or hi?
So it's kind of nice to show what the tax rate history has been. Typically, depending on the equation itself, anytime EAP increases, your tax rate does go down. So that's why you see that slope, or that small. Going down, that decrease. The reason we show the different funds is at one time you could only levy for a certain rate in a fund. So, for example, the O&M fund, the most that could ever be is 0.75. Working cash is 0.05. So, O&M, operation maintenance, we are levying for 0.53. The most we could levy is the most extension could be is 0.75. Working cash 0.05. Special education 0.8. A lot of the other funds in the past had a max rate. But also staying within the confines of your limiting ratio. What's happening then is district leadership would then transfer the max of the levy in a fund, transfer it to another fund that wasn't maxed out, and just leave it there. They took those stipulations away, and mainly you're just focusing then on your limiting ratio. You're focusing here's what you're mentioning here, as far as the levy request with debt services. So the percent increase in newspaper, you can see what we're levying in 2025. What we levied in 2024, you can see those percentages based on what the extension was. So actual levy extended with debt services, projected 2025 extensions 4.7, 2024 extension had a 5.1% increase from the previous year. Take a look at that. Stop me anytime. Take a look at that next slide. Here you can see the dollar amount we're requesting for each fund. See the levy versus the extension. So for example, the ed fund's 171.6. So for example, if you take a look at the sport fund, last year we had received 3.6. We only spend roughly 3.6, 3.3. That fund has actually been increasing. It doesn't help us to increase that fund. The reason I'm saying that is because our financial profile score only looks at the ed fund, the operations and maintenance fund, the transportation fund, and the cash fund. Unless the IMRF / social security fund is negative. The tort is negative. So that's why we're driving some of these funds down. We're also driving the transportation fund down is because it grew so much over COVID that we could have tax objections if it's too high. So that's why you see some differences in these funds. And then eventually we'll make sure we're levying for roughly what we are going to expend in those funds. Take a look at the next slide. So we have the levy presentation to the finance committee tonight. We have a levy presentation and 10 levy resolution adopted, which meets the 20-day requirements for 12/17 to the Board of Education. We're going to release a public notice to Shaw Media on the 9th. We have to publish public notice, cannot be more than 14 days prior to the hearing. There's all these, you can see, rules that you have to follow. Even the border around the levy has to be 1 inch, which is kind of crazy, but there's all these things that we have to follow. We're going to have the public hearing then on the 17th. We just got to make sure that we actually file it and turn it in and get it signed, show that we did what we're supposed to. We'll post everything, and then we'll come out in February with the site finance projections, fund balance strategy phase 2, and then we'll sign off roughly March, April. Kendall County is a little bit later than Will County on the actual extension. So the reason we put up those projections is because we know what CPI will be for the following year, so we have a good indication of at least the minimum amount of revenue we receive from our taxpayers, not necessarily the construction.
Any questions?
We had just pulled out the highlights from the whole presentation. Next informational item. I did not put a committee report together on this. The reason I did put a committee report is because of timing. High school post extracurricular transportation analysis. That did come up last week to put it on our agenda. We do plan to look into that. November 5th, it was requested to explore the possibility of providing transportation for after-school activities. And what we mean by after-school activities, it's more the club type of things and also for any kind of practices. We'd be happy to look into that. We plan to look into that. But our number one priority is our middle school. So right now our middle school does not have transportation. The reason they don't have transportation is because we just don't have the drivers. So we actually have it budgeted for middle school. Yeah, we're just not providing it currently. So once we have the drivers, we plan to make sure that they have transportation, but we just don't have a guarantee that we'll be able to cover every single sport.
So just to clarify, so with the middle school, we're talking about transportation to and from school to other schools or other locations where they have an athletic event.
Correct.
This item, the high school post extracurricular, is for transportation from the school to students' homes at an alternate time later in the day so that they can participate in activities.
Yeah, so go ahead. Nope.
I think I brought this up before, but just saying that the issue that we have with the middle school, should we consider we have 2 or 3 different bus services?
Yeah, we're looking into that as well. Yeah, someone else will provide it. Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing with triple tier. You know, triple tier is it's a triple tier. 2 vendors.
Yeah, I even know last week we reached out to get into Durham. I haven't heard back from Durham, so we'll follow up on that.
The activity buses can't serve a purpose
For the middle school.
And so we are.
My mind will never meet because they have corrosion on the support beams, which everyone's house has that, but it's automatic failure every time. Resecuring, so it's to reload and resecure every year, which would cost more than the building would cost to put the building back together. There's surfacing things for the actual ramps, which need to be replaced. So that would also, I think that was like a $17,000 replacement for ramps. So some of those items are so large that it would be feasible to replace the unit instead of actually repairs.
What are the implications of
There's no, we still can occupy units not in compliance, from what I know, for the and we have been for
Those are rentals, aren't they?
So we are exploring the cost analysis. Also going right now.
We've been going around the idea to the rental program for discounts and impact developers. I'm looking at the bottom right now. So their plans have 60 studios, 108 on that 26. With these types of units, you can possibly generate $82,000 tax fees. So in lieu of these impact fees, we can work with most free for our employees, wage application, and $5,000. But I just walked in, it's 3 months, at 10 employees, still waiting application and fees by $5,000. We did propose 3 months. They came back with 2 options. We could do 2 months or 2 month lease, or 3 months with a 15 month lease. The 3 months was capped at 5 employees. Even that 10 employees times the lease cost is more money to provide more hours for our employees. We can recommend the bottom option 2 months. I think it's program.
I have comments that are. My comment was, I really like how
For all employees.
Is that all? All employees. All employees. When the teacher, it is becoming district probably, that's gonna take advantage of this is probably on the younger side. Would you agree with that? Okay. They make $50-something thousand on a starter and average $2,200 a month on rent. That's 5%. I just don't see this as a problem. I have not been doing it. I know if I actually do some of this, I just don't know. It's just a position. I mean, you know, like for party.
Unless,
That's what I told you.
no, I'm just kind of thinking out loud, unless it.
Well, look at the one that is.
Right, but if we have a roommate, two people actually. I don't know if that's something that.
Yeah, I don't know, I'm just saying, I don't, like, some others take. So, 14 months. Somebody say it's fine, all good. We'll try to make sure we, three people who, so I, it's actually, I mean,
Which is 24. Head of operations. He's the best one we've ever
Like I said, when I walked in, we just presented this proposal inside. Yes, I.
I feel like so I mean, people are able to take advantage of it. If we have larger than 10, probably decide which I think are.
Points.
What I think that's kind of is, some kind of, verbiage that says if there are funds available, some kind of, remuneration. I'm just scared of this. On, it sounds like they consider hold those funds, but they're just not available based on our own contract and something. I was curious, would it impact the, so there's no contract there, right? Would it impact the, Will we approach the village with that?
Yeah. But we have very
Right, that's what I was, they basically, yeah.
Coincidentally, I just asked him earlier today to provide us with that picture.
Of course.
And just one other piece, we were at the Will County Economic Development last March. They said that one bedroom apartment in Will County. That's good. So that's a lot, that is a lot. That's what I'm saying.
I guess just the questions are just raised, and the questions overall.
Eventually, every year, perpetuity.
I'm opting to decide which is
So are we comfortable having information items this month or this meeting? Or do we want to just approve?
My recommendation.
That's all right.
Yeah, I said we did.
Alright, so we all comfortable tabling it? Like having your commissioner, Perfect.
Slide 39. And what I want to point out is moving forward that we probably budgeted 1.8. However, again, we talked about how we're not necessarily concerned about the, I'm just gonna round off 6.5 to 7, assuming these are $7 million. What concerns me though, if you scroll down, is the projections itself, because of the hold harmless part of it. Summary of loss, you scroll down. This is what concerns me. Because of the hold harmless now, you know, it's 6.7. Next year, we would have thought we would receive 13.8, then 20, 26, 33, 40. Yes, yeah. That's a concern. Go ahead.
So the whole farm was
Yeah, so basically what you received the previous year, you're going to receive the next year plus tier. So then the next year.
And that's,
Yeah.
that's kind of where I was expecting it to go. I think that in some of the communication, at least maybe I read it wrong, but it sounded like that.
Using more, but
Well,
what we projected because of the
yes.
compounding factor. Yes. Not only use lose, means you receive what you received last year, last year. So as far as projection wise, yes, the term is
guaranteed for year X. Yes. X minus 1 plus tier X minus 1.
let me do the yes. Yeah. So if you receive $1 million this year, plus $1 million at tier funding, next year automatically we're going to receive 1.1. Yeah, this year we received $1 million. Tier funding was going to be $100,000. Next year we're going to receive $1,200,000. So we just missed out on $90,000. So the concern is future years because of the compounding.
That is the stupidest way of this whole thing that I could ever think of in terms of the compounding formula like that. Just inflation based or something along those lines. It's just financially
So that
it just doesn't. So this year will be $6 million plus, next year will be $14 million plus.
$13 million less guaranteed. So I don't know what tiers can be.
yeah. First chance.
I'm not saying. So when you probably stop. Really concerned about if we're still out that number. Elaborate a little more on what is concerned.
Good night. I think you probably get a better illustration of their projections. Can you bring out the I know it works. Controllable capacity that helps determine that, but yeah, keep on going. Keep on going, keep on going, keep on going, keep on going, keep on going. Well, what's interesting is if you take a look at the presentation that we put together, the evidence-based funding cost of wage index, it's consumer of wage index, but you can see how they change one variable that really hurt us in the formula itself. Whatever the table was, I'm sorry I wasn't paying attention. I mean, you can keep on going down or up. It's up to you, whatever direction you want to go. I'll tell you what's that. A little bit weird slideshow. So this year, because of that $6 million, now it's 17. Before it was roughly 11, right? And then we made that change to make it 17. But next year now we have a negative number, then another negative number, then another negative number, pretty large negative numbers. Because of revenues, again, we use round numbers. 7, now 14, based on rejections, we thought it was going to be 14 more in state revenue in this line, which then wouldn't have been negative. This year would have been $21 million, which then wouldn't have been negative. Does that make sense? Bless you. So that's right now, like here, I'm not concerned, but I'm starting to get concerned here, for sure.
Right.
Yeah, when I see this, here, I don't like to see that.
Right.
No, me too. I don't think anybody up here does.
So that's why when we said, hey, we have $18 million for the projects, we're only going to recommend $4 million. We already know that we cut this 18 to 14. I'm sorry, this 18 to roughly, 4 instead.
4. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But we know we can't keep on doing that
Right.
long term. Does that help?
It does, I'm just trying to think through how we can help this.
The hole keeps on getting deeper here.
Yeah.
The hole keeps on getting deeper here because there was more capital projects. Like when you see $23 million. It is. I mean, like, should we be looking out this far? Probably not. But it's a roadmap.
You have to.
And again, for anybody who might be listening, who has never listened before, we have a whole bunch of buildings that are aging. Getting that, we need to do everything in renovation.
Are we experiencing or expecting any reductions in federal funding due to the continuing shutdowns or to the ongoing changes being proposed at the federal level? Preschool lunches, Title I, IDEA. Right now, we haven't heard from the state. We haven't heard from the federal government that's actually going to affect us. Does that mean it could? It could. Right now, there's on the table that they're looking for, like, for example, IDEA. You probably heard they're looking at making adjustments to the IDEA. IDEA has 4 parts to it. It has Part A, which is basically the rules. Part B is how we're funded. Part C is not how we're funded, but there is allotments assigned to it. Part D is the one that they're thinking about reallocating.
Okay.
Not necessarily cutting, but I don't know necessarily what that means. But it doesn't affect us either. We're in the Part B, but since they're talking about Part B and moving Part D into Part C, it's a possible. Monitor. Anytime we have any kind of updates, we're going to make sure that we share them.
Or like even like the commodities, we talked about that lunch program and bringing that those have been greatly reduced at the level that I don't know if they affect the schools the same way or food banks, the commodities program is.
The funding was still the same years.
Not entirely certain on that. I can pull right through those ones.
for that, but it doesn't mean that it probably couldn't come down the road, but I mean, we'll continuously just see if there's any kind of impacts that are arise through this. Here's some times, I guess.
Yes.
I think those are all the questions.
Anybody have anything else or motion? Oh.
Let's get into the future.
Yeah.
So next month, we have the annual comprehensive financial report, act for the internal controls, action plan update, community engagement update, and we'll have the district property plan preview. We're gonna bring that a little earlier than we had last year, just because of everything that's going on with our enrollment projections. And then we have reserve reduction plan, public act 103, reserve 304, elementary public act 120, 895. We're going to look for the tax levy adoption resolutions for the levy and then the capital improvement plan state recommendations. Farm lease renewal, food service recommendation, monthly financials.
Motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, 8:26.
Personnel Policy and Administration Committee for November 12th. In attendance, we have Chairperson and Board President, Mr. Westphal. We have Board Member Mr. Marlowe, Board Member Ms. Kelly, Superintendent Dr. Wood, and Representative tonight's agenda, we have 3 informational items. We have a community relations update, a review of administrative procedures tied to policy 810 in connection with community. Number 8, Victoria. After finishing second in 2023 and second in 2024. Congratulations to Plainfield South Boys Cross Country Team. They earned a strong 6th place finish. And the Plainfield North Girls Cross Country Team achieved their highest finish in school history by placing 14th in state. Congratulations to all of the athletes for these accomplishments. I also want to highlight some upcoming events at the high school fall plays. They begin this week. East is hosting its Wonderful Life. It starts tomorrow through Sunday. Plainfield Central is hosting Failure, a Love Story. It starts Friday through Sunday. Plainfield North is hosting Games of Tierras. It starts Friday and it goes through Sunday. And Plainfield South is hosting Almost Maine. It starts Friday and it goes through Sunday. In addition, the Plainfield Parent Community Network will present on Thursday, November 20th at Plainfield East High School how traffickers use social media. Doors open at 6:30 with a provider fair, and the program starts promptly at 7 p.m. Also, happy School Board Appreciation Month. November 15th is designated School Board Member. I would like to take a moment to thank the Board of Education for their time, dedication, and leadership for our students, staff, and community. I would especially like to thank our chairperson and board president, Mr. Westphal, board member, Ms. Morales, and board member, Ms. Dalton, for their time and commitment to the policy and personnel. A lot of hard work, volunteer time goes into being a board member, so thank you. Our first item is an informational item, 3.2, the administrative procedures tied to policy 810, connection and community. These procedures update our recent change in comments if it violates the administrative procedures as outlined. There was a question from a board member related to if AI generated any posts and whether they were allowed or accepted on our social media platform. I did reach out to the Community Relations Department and found out there is no AI generated content being shared on behalf of the district. Our AI features are not enabled on any of our social media. However, while PSD202 does not employ AI generated posts, there are parent and community groups with this feature who potentially could have it enabled and have it appear, so we will make sure to share this information with our PTO. Education, County staff, and Board of Education of Plainfield Community Consolidated School District 202. The staff program costs $50,459. Students who attend this program may also be required special services within the program. Additional related services that could be provided are physical therapy, a whole-time nurse, orientation these services are near, the total cost will increase to $113,561. The district would incur the additional cost for the full-time nurse, PT, and O&M regardless of whether the student attends Friday services. Any questions? You're ready to look ahead for our next meeting is December 10th at 8 o'clock. Before you will be following your finance committee meeting. We will give a strategic plan update and we will bring forward policies to recommend the language change. We did get the request, which is why our agenda tonight was thin. But I do anticipate one more on how to proceed.
Let's take as long as,
Still take the tax off at zero.
all right.